Good evening to all. Welcome to our first series of Let's Talk Cannabis. As you know, cannabis is definitely a important topic within our community, whether it's recreational, whether it's medicinal. We wanted to begin our first set of series discussing the medicinal benefits of cannabis. As you know, I am Senator Soro, and we have a panel here tonight of some esteemed guests. Dr. Hillary Woodson, Dr. Asari Christian, and this forum, this series tonight will be our first of many series will be moderated by my Chief of Staff, Simone Edwards Williams. So before I allow her to introduce our panelists, I want to apologize for our late start. We had some technical difficulties. We're missing one of our panelists, but he'll be joining soon. So without further ado, Simone, you may proceed.
Good evening, and welcome all. Yes, like the Senator said, the Virgin Islands is getting ready to commence the cannabis industry. And before we detract from the health and the medicinal benefits of cannabis, we felt it important to present on this platform a conversation with physicians and healers to our community for educational, informational purposes. So I hope that this is an enlightening experience for all. Normally, when we have conversations about cannabis, and a lot of people have conversations about cannabis, because we're still in a pretty relatively conservative community. A lot of times the conversation is amongst cliques or behind closed doors, or it's still seen talked about as a taboo topic. And we want to really normalize cannabis because there are tremendous benefits. And we have some health professionals with us, some industry professionals with us. And I want to say thank you for participating and agreeing to, engage our community in this very, very important conversation on health and healthcare and the benefits of cannabis. So without further ado, I'll start my introduction. Dr. Hillary Woodson Gaskin was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and moved to Washington, D.C. At the tender age of 4. As one of 4 African Americans in her 6th grade class, Dr. Woodson emerged as a STEM standout. In high school, the young prodigy was recruited by a multitude of colleges and universities nationwide. However, her choice to attend Spelman in Atlanta, Georgia, was the realization of a lifelong dream. A dual degree biomedical engineering major, Dr. Woodson shifted her educational track to biology prior to her senior year. She then graduated cum laude with a minor in mathematics and accepted a position with the Procter & Gamble company as a product development engineer. While she was positioned for success and on the fast track to management, 1 year in corporate America was more than Dr. Woodson could endure. Instead, she opted to attend medical school at Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons. A fierce and loyal community servant, Dr. Woodson's passion to help others followed her to Tanzania, where she became the first American medical student under the Student National Medical Association initiative in an HIV tuberculosis ward for women. Subsequent to completing medical school, Dr. Woodson returned to the Washington, D.C. area in 1997 to train in family medicine at the University of Maryland Medical System. While there, she won the Peter M. Hartman Award for Excellence in the Physician-Patient Relationship. At the turn of the millennium, Dr. Woodson established herself as a well-respected family medicine practitioner in Maryland before founding her own integrative practice, family practice, Blended Healing Concepts, Inc. in 2002. As a first-time business owner, she participated in intensive training with Queen Afua, a renowned holistic health practitioner and author of Heal Thyself and Sacred Woman. Between 2003 and 2008, Dr. Woodson joined the Mid-Atlantic Permanente Medical Group in both Maryland and Washington, D.C. Armed by her steadfast faith in God, Dr. Woodson relocated to the U.S. Virgin Islands in 2008 with a mission to serve a smaller community. The move provided the chance to maintain her commitment to community-based care while treating pediatric patients in the maternal child health clinic and adult patients in the Royal Leicester Snyder Hospital. She transitioned back into private practice and built a large primary care practice within the Red Hope family practice in St. Thomas. Never one to live within the ethics and expectations of others, Dr. Woodson's departure from traditional family medicine continued at the University of Arizona from 2009. While there, she completed the rigorous and prestigious 2-year 1,000-hour fellowship in integrative medicine under the guidance of Dr. Andrew Well. Dr. Woodson has since been branded the holistic family doctor of and for the community. Currently the owner and operator of the Virgin Islands Center for Integrative Medicine, Dr. Woodson teaches the importance of healing and balancing holistic practices with more common allopathic methods. At the Center of Integrative Medicine, patients of all ages are encouraged to take full inventory of self and are privy to a personalized medicinal template that, besides traditional Western medicine, includes acupressure, nutrition, mind-body medicine, prayer, body mechanics, herbology, and more. Dr. Woodson is a proud mother of 4 and loving wife to Toussaint Gaskins, CEO of Inno Asset Management. In her spare time, you will find her reading, enjoying all things involving children, and staying connected to nature. Dr. Woodson, did I get that right?
Yes, thank you, Simone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me, Senator Sorrell. I appreciate the invitation. Always looking to serve the community, and education is one of my favorite things to do.
Awesome. Thank you. And now we have Senator Sauer, help me with the first name. Asari. Yep. Dr. Asari Christian. Dr. Asari Christian is a physical medicine and rehabilitation physician with interest in quality and improvement science, driving disability policy and care for persons with disabilities. Clinically, he enjoys pain medicine and musculoskeletal medicine. That's a mouthful. He is an attending psychiatrist at Good Shepherd Rehabilitation.
Psychiatrist.
Pardon?
Psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist.
Yes.
At Good Shepherd Rehabilitation Network in Allington, Pennsylvania. He has academic appointment with the University of Pennsylvania, clinical expertise in musculoskeletal issues, including joint pain, low back pain, arthritis, stroke, non-interventional pain management, spasticity, dystonia management, migraines, headaches, urodynamics, and medicinal cannabis. Dr. Christian is a graduate of the Mongan Commonwealth Fund Fellowship at Harvard Medical School, where he obtained a MHP at Harvard School of Public Health with a concentration in health policy and management. Dr. Christian's goal is to contribute solutions to health disparities here in the US and abroad. Dr. Christian has been working to create the first physical medicine and rehabilitation program in sub-Saharan Africa. He wants to create high-performance, sustainable medical rehabilitation programs in places where they are non-existent through creation of context and cultural specific rehabilitation residencies in low-resource countries, and impact health policies and practices that improve access to quality and safe healthcare for economically disadvantaged groups and persons with disabilities. Dr. Christian, did I get that right?
Yes, that's a lot, but thank you so much as well. I am happy and privileged to be here with all of you and look forward to learning and contributing.
Thank you. And our third and final panelist, who we're trying to get hooked up with sound, is Ras Bobby, the Caribbean herbalist. For over 40 years, Ras Bobby, the Caribbean herbalist, has lived a life of selfless service by helping those in need with the knowledge and application of herbal plants and remedies. Born in Curacao and raised in the nature Isle of Dominica, Ras Bobby has traveled extensively throughout the Caribbean and is well known, well loved, and sought after for his knowledge, warm manner, and approach to natural healing. Ras Bobby was a student and close friend of one of the world's most prolific master herbalists, the late Dr. Sebi, who was well known for promoting an alkaline and mucusless diet for optimal health and well-being. Revered for his ability to reverse critical and chronic health conditions using herbs, Ras Bobby continues this tradition and has loving testimonials from countless people he has helped over the years. Recognized locally, regionally, and internationally as a radio personality, motivational speaker, and lecturer, Ras Bobby has dedicated his life to serving humanity and has solidified an important place within the grassroots communities here and abroad. He has led numberless workshops and seminars in the US Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, Anguilla, Antigua, St. Eustache, St. Martin, St. Kitts, Nevis, Dominica, St. Lucia, Puerto Rico, Guadeloupe, Barbados, Guyana, Boston, and New York. Currently, he is the owner of Ras Bobby Herbal Products, LLC, with stores in both St. Thomas and St. Croix, and serves as the chairman of the Health and Nutrition Committee of the Caribbean Rastafari Organization. He is a Rastafari yoga teacher and health guru for the St. Thomas Rastafari Collective. I see that he has not yet gotten back in, but once he does, I will pause before him so that he can give his welcome. Yeah, all right. So I hope this is not a Senate session. Let's just put that out there. This is going to be a very conversational piece. And I would like the panelists to start with the history of cannabis. Just in doing some research, and I'm not sure how many people are aware that cannabis actually was not always illegal. And when I found out the year that it became a Schedule I drug, I was like, wow, because my grandfather was alive then, he's still alive now. So it was really not that long ago. And so prior to that, cannabis was something that you could buy over the counter, actually, and used for a variety of reasons. So let's start with the history of the healing of the nation.
Dr. Woodson, should I go first?
Yes, please.
All right. So again, thanks everyone for being here and for this opportunity to talk about cannabis, the medicinal side of things. And Simone, thank you. And Senator Sorrell, thank you as well. And as you mentioned, the use of cannabis actually dates time in medicine. So going back to 2700 BC, so this is before Christ, right? So a long time ago in Asia, in China, this is when it was documented, but I'm sure before then, even cannabis were being used. This is when there's an emperor in China who was using cannabis to treat people with multiple medical conditions, malaria, beriberi, and some other issues like that. And then from there, in 1839, cannabis was introduced to the West by this British physician named William O'Shanahan. So apparently at that time, the Queen of England was known to be using cannabis to help with menstrual cramps. And since 1840 to 1945, so a 100-year period, cannabis was actually in the dispensary for US physicians. So as Simone was talking about, US doctors could actually prescribe cannabis for patients from 1845 to about 1940, 5 or so. So cannabis is not a new concept when we talk about cannabis in medicine. And it was taken out of the dispensary for multiple reasons. And one being that we, at that time, medicine really did not understand the pharmacology of cannabis. We didn't really understand how this works. And then there were some other political and social issues that relates to how that was taken out. And then outside of that historical perspective, even looking in terms of medicine, since 1980, we've had medicines that's been approved by the FDA that is cannabis-based. So a lot of times what I hear is people say, oh, this is a new thing. We haven't had cannabis. But even since 1980, we've had a medication called Marinol, which is a cannabis-based medicine. And then since then, there's been other type of formulation of cannabis that we're using for medicine. So this is just to say that this is not a new topic in medicine. It was put away for some time. And I'm glad that we're coming back to this again with some knowledge of how this actually works in the pharmacology of it.
He doesn't leave me many blanks to fill in, but very nice summary. And I want to take it back even further, because in some of the ancient pyramids in Egypt, there were hieroglyphics of the cannabis plant 12,000 years ago. So cannabis has been used throughout antiquity. And when you fast forward up until the mid 1800s, as Dr. Christian mentioned, really Dr. O'Shaughnessy was responsible. He was a British physician who went and traveled to India. And he was responsible for traveling around with various dignitaries. And as we'll talk about shortly, cannabis is indigenous to many parts of the world now, but originally was thought to be found in India and areas in that geographical location, India, Tibet, China. And as he saw these people being healed with this plant, he became very curious, and he actually wrote a seminal paper that was published in a medical journal back in 1839. And it was on the Indian preparations of hemp. And he went on to elucidate all of the things that he observed. And at that time, we didn't have a whole lot of medical journals to read and to learn from. It was really more word of mouth. And so when he returned to England, a lot of historians really credit him with bringing the medicine of cannabis to the Western world. Mind you, it was known long before that, before it reached the Western world. But in 1839, it really became more popularized. So as Dr. Christian said, members of the Queen's Royal Court, the Queen of England, various doctors all throughout Europe, throughout the US, were using it to treat various conditions, migraines, menstrual cramps, making it into a paste and using it for anesthesia for various surgeries. One thing that I'd like to point out, we think back to the 1800s and where we were in the United States at that time. So if you overlay some of the history of the United States onto the history of cannabis, we start to kind of understand some deeper issues with cannabis. And one thing that I like to point out is that, the Civil War, late 1800s, and I'm not a historian, I'm a physician, so forgive me if my dates are a little off. But the Civil War came, a lot of agriculture boom. The textiles were, the newspaper companies, the paper mills, everything was really being produced. We were becoming a production country. And in that, you had a lot of political factions, if you will, that really didn't like how cannabis was kind of taking over, specifically some in the tobacco industry and some in the paper industry. And as a point, the Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. So, even predating what the time period in which we're talking, George Washington, was known to have grown hemp, and we'll talk about the distinctions between hemp and cannabis in a bit, but he was known to have grown hemp. Thomas Jefferson was known to have used hemp. The Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. So this was a plant that was very common in our country. And what tended to happen as we started moving into the Industrial Revolution, and you started getting a lot of Mexican immigrants coming up at that time through what is now known as California, Arizona, the West and Southwest. And with it, they brought what was known as Sensimilia or cannabis. They called it marijuana. So marijuana is actually a pejorative term. It's not a friendly term. And so I'd like to steer the conversation whenever I'm talking with people about cannabis. I like to call it cannabis and not weed, not marijuana. We're talking about pharmacology of a plant. We're not talking about the recreational use for euphoria. And so as the Mexican immigrants were coming up, they're brown and Black people, and they would use the cannabis plant to relax after a long day in the field. And in using that, people would notice, wow, they're pretty laid back and comfortable and chill. And so it started to become more popular in Latino communities, at that time Mexican communities, and it started to make its way into the African-American musical culture. So a lot of the jazz musicians, now we're moving into the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Harlem Renaissance period. Cannabis use was very prevalent at that time. Some of the greatest compositions musically were supposedly under the influence of cannabis, Dizzy Gillespie, etc. And so what tended to happen was politically, along with what was happening socially, there was a big faction in the US government that was basically unhappy with how popular cannabis was becoming. It was used by Negroes, by darkies, by coloreds. It was not something that the European or the white Americans were using a lot at that time publicly. And so one thing that Dr. Christian mentioned, and that I'd like to point out, is that Congress passed a Marijuana Tax Act in 1937. And in doing so in 1937, at this point, farmers could grow what they wanted to, just like farmers anywhere can throw seeds out and see what grows, see what doesn't grow. And farmers, we know, are a special breed. And so there were plenty of people growing cannabis for various uses. Cannabis stalk is known to be some of the most hardy and powerful plant-based material. It's used for ropes, for sails, for paper, etc. So people were using it more than just for the euphoria that was associated with it. But when this tax act was passed, it basically levied a very large tax on cannabis farmers. And they were like, we can't continue to grow this and have to pay all of this tax on this plant. So it started to fall out of favor. Around that same time, here comes the, help me, Dr. Christian, it was the Federal Narcotics Commission, right? Late 1930s, early 1940s. And there was a gentleman by the name of Harry S. Anslinger. And he went on to lead the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which over the next 35 years, this guy led the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And apparently in his pockets were the paper guys, the newspaper guys. And they were like, look, you've got to shut cannabis down because it's getting ready and it's starting to affect our bottom line. So all of these laws started to kick in the late 1930s to 1940s, on up until 1970, which is when the Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA, was formed. And that was formed under a merger with the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, merging into other federal agencies. And so most of us contemporarily know about the DEA, especially in the medical field. Any medical doctor anywhere in the world, well, I would say in the US, has to have a DEA license to be able to prescribe narcotics. And in that DEA structure, they have different schedules. So just think of a schedule as a category. So Schedule 1 is where they put cannabis. And in that schedule are things like psychobilin, which are the medicinal mushrooms, heroin, LSD, ecstasy. And in that schedule, or in that category, they were found, or they categorized it by saying they have no medicinal benefit, they have a high potential for abuse, and they have no scientific evidence of efficacy. And that is where cannabis has ended up, and that's where cannabis has stayed. But I just want the audience to understand that there was a very strong political lobby behind getting cannabis into a prohibited stage. And if we were practicing 100 years ago, I see a few other physicians on this call, we would have been able to prescribe cannabis with no problem.
I don't think I have much to add to that. Did we get Ross on the phone yet?
No,
Dr.
he's gonna be there shortly. His technician is on the spot, so he should be in any minute soon.
So I thought that was a really great and a brilliant description of kind of the political and social influence. So it wasn't just that the doctors didn't really understand the pharmacology, but there were so many things that were going on at that time. And in addition, very interestingly, California, going back to the history of where the Mexicans were coming in, California was the first state to outlaw cannabis. And then they became the first state to actually make cannabis legal. And the thing that's also very interested and needed to be noted is this idea of making cannabis a Schedule 1. And as Dr. Woodson described it, a Schedule 1, according to the FDA, is any substance that has no medicinal benefit. So even though we've had cannabis approved in, in some medicines now since 1980, that designation of a Schedule 1 is still present today. And what that means is that this restricts federal research money to go to the use of cannabis. So even when we're looking at data in the literature regarding the benefit of cannabis, because it was classified as a Schedule 1, which means it has no medical benefit, you could not study cannabis, or you couldn't get any federal research money to study cannabis for its medicinal benefit or any positive thing. You have to study for the worst outcomes with it. So a lot of the literature we have regarding cannabis came from a lot of the psychiatrists who were studying people's behavior and people's psychiatric issues. So definitely, we think that with time, kind of changing that Schedule 1 will definitely help us to really better understand some of the real benefits we have with cannabis, which is kind of known now. And even now, we have tons of literature and data to support that benefit.
If I may add from, I'm not the physician, I'm just the historian. And if I may add just briefly, can everybody hear me? Yes, right? Okay. Under President Nixon in 1970, they declared the war on drugs. And of course, that's when Schedule 1 came in. And then he put together a commission to definitely to review the laws and the benefits of cannabis. And in 1972, that commission recommended that it be decriminalized and be removed as a Schedule 1 drug. And of course, as Dr. Woodson said, it became more of a political matter in nature. So I just wanted to add that historical, from the policy standpoint perspective. But back to you, Simone. I think Ras Bobby is somewhere in on this conversation. Okay.
Hi. Are we in? And we are live. Good evening, Ross Bobby.
Hey, good evening. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am.
Oh boy, it was so frustrating. I mean, it seems I'm a real dinosaur in this world of technology.
Don't worry, I did your introduction. You got a standing ovation. Right now, we were just discussing the history of cannabis and the socioeconomic and the political suppression of the plant. And so if you want to throw any historical nuggets in there. Feel free.
Oh, well, I just want to say good night to you and all your listeners. And ganja is a very passionate thing to the Rastafari. So I would say a special good evening to the Rastafari community. And I would even say to all the indigenous people on the planet, you know, so the herb, as we know it within Rastafari, is used for all different kinds of things, all the different parts of the cannabis plant. And then we have two main strains that we use as Rastafari people. It's the cannabis indica and the cannabis sativa. And one makes us energetic and the other one puts us in a meditation. But then other than that, Rastafari have had discovered ganja from a long time. And it's good to know that now ganja is really discovered. You know, but now all the trials and the tribulations that come about as a result of the use of the holy herb, which within Rastafari we see it as our sacrament. And I know there are people on the Caribbean level listening right now too, members of the Caribbean Rastafari organization. You know, and like from a long time we've been advocating for not only the decriminalization of cannabis, but the absolute legalization of the herb. And if not the herb for all people, the indigenous people in St. Thomas and in St. Croix and in St. John should be able to keep using the herb as a means of healing. So it's not just the concept of just smoking or somebody, you know, and for that situation, a lot of controversies has happened as a result of propaganda. Again, the herb that is most widely used on the planet. There's thousands of people in St. Thomas using ganja every day. So it's like even like a communal meditation. You know, many Rasta people, when they get up in the morning, the first thing they use is a split. And you can see them vex and you can see them fighting. And it's able to mellow them in a system where they have no housing, they have no land. So again, just the way of life of the people who use the herb, it was tremendous amount of tribulation. Even there was a time a Rasta man couldn't even get a woman as a result of the stigma relating to the herb, you know, and a lot of family mash up from long time. And Rasta people have still been disregarded in terms of even the consideration for reparation, because a lot of people have had a tremendous amount of problems from a long time, you know, had to be in a jail for no reason. And then finally the herb has been discovered and no compensation for all those people who go through all the tribulation from a long time. And I'm just saying it's a especially repressive situation here in the US, yeah, so it seems. Because what I'm saying is that the other islands, like islands in Antigua, you know, islands in like Antigua, even if you would say oh, it's not Antigua in America, it's different. We're not in America, we're in the Caribbean. And it's the same experience everywhere. But the government of Antigua now consider to forward a kind of reparations to Rasta people and allow them to plant their weed in the area where they, in their domain freely, because as naturalists we have a different community system and it relating to now the sociological aspects, because even if it's underestimated, it's very crucial and it's an integral part of the way of life of many people other than Rasta people. I even think people who are not Rasta use more ganja than those who are Rasta. But at the same time, it's we that get all the jail and it's a disregard. So other than that, I just remember that I didn't say a special good night to our sister Sarah for creating this event. So big up to you. But I think I talked a little bit for the time, and I know I came late. I have to apologize for that. But it's really because I'm a dinosaur in this technological world. Somebody had to come to to save me, and I'm happy. So really nice to be here. As I say, tonight I feel very blissful as a result of the use of the herb, because I do think I could come on this session there without having some nice cannabis. But to say the truth, I didn't even smoke it. I put the equivalent of a spliff um, in some coconut milk, and I spiced it up a little and I blended it. And now I feel so blissful as though I smoke a cocoa split. So it's just a great way of life, and I just wanted to introduce myself like that on behalf of the Rastafari people, on behalf of the Rastafari collective, which is a collective of Rastafari, responsible Rastafari people who use ganja on a daily basis. We have certain questions that we have to go through as we go along with. I don't really want to monopolize, so now as the time goes on, I will say a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Raz Bobby. And yeah, we couldn't have this platform, we couldn't have this conference, this forum without Raz Bobby, the Caribbean herbalist, and the community. And so thank you for that. I think now that we have established the consensus that cannabis is nothing new under the sun, and you use the word rediscover, it's become cyclic, so to speak, because it was, we were able to, well, not we, but, it was able to be prescribed, it was able to be used freely in years not too long ago. And then there was a prohibition, so to speak, and for a myriad of reasons. And now we have come full circle to the realization that cannabis has medicinal benefits. And so now that the world and other countries moving faster than the United States, because Canada has moved, I think the UK, in terms of freeing up monies for research to happen. The US is still lagging behind in that sense because it is still considered a Schedule 1. But there's no denying that there's medicinal benefits to cannabis. And tonight, that is what we are here to discuss with the community. And I'm excited for this conversation. And so we can start with, how does cannabis benefit us from a health standpoint?
I'll take this one. I'll start off with this one because we are all experts in our various
Blue button. When it comes up again, hit the blue button.
Okay. One of the biggest scientific discoveries of the 21st century was what was called the human cannabinoid system, or the human endocannabinoid system. Interestingly enough, morphine is a derivative of the poppy plant. Okay, morphine can be made into a pharmaceutical grade and be used for various pain relief. On the streets, it can be used as heroin. So even though morphine had been discovered and had been used for almost 100 years, scientists did not get into the scene and discover that we had morphine receptors in our body until close to 100 years later, after the plant had already been used. Similarly, with cannabis, we have discovered that human beings produce our own cannabinoids. So cannabinoid, OID, we have endocannabinoids, which mean inside of us. And the endocannabinoids that we produce act like keys into the receptors that we have on most of the cells in our bodies. And this system exists in human beings, in animals, in vertebrates, which mean you have a spine, and invertebrates, which mean you don't have a spine. So things like mollusks and snails have an endocannabinoid system. So it really was a very, very interesting discovery. And once they discovered that animals have these receptors in their cells, scientists then went on, and mainly the main scientist was a man by the name of Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, and he's out of the Hebrew University of Israel. And Dr. Mechoulam's team is very well known in the cannabis field, in the cannabis science field, because they were part of the team that helped discover the endocannabinoid system and then the receptors. And then they kept going and said, well, what do we produce in our bodies to actually hit on these receptors? So science is always progressing worldwide, and it's not just in the US. I think where we as US folk and US medical folk, we tend to get kind of caught up and think we're the best at everything, but we're really not all the time. We have great advances in the US, but there are other countries who are advancing scientific knowledge too. So when you start talking about the endocannabinoid system, once we discovered that we have and we produce our own endocannabinoids on demand. So if something is out of balance, that's the purpose of the endocannabinoid system. It helps get us back in balance. And it does that for my physicians on the line, by working in the neuron systems and the presynaptic neurons, in the synapses, and there's a feedback loop. So when things are not received on the second neuron, the second neuron says, hey, I need more of that. And the first neuron shoots some more down. So our bodies are constantly in this state of making our own endocannabinoids. Well, as we discovered our own endocannabinoid system, we also found that the plant has cannabinoids too. And the plant is found to have to be able to interact with our endocannabinoid system, similar to our own lock and key. So as the plant has over 100 cannabinoids that have been identified, THC is the most well-known, and I believe the first, well, no, it was not the first cannabinoid of the plant to be discovered, but it is the most well-known. And that ingredient, that one cannabinoid, is the one that made its way over to the Schedule 1. Like, it's because of that THC that cannabis is now on Schedule 1. But as science progressed, we were found to discover, CBD is now very popular. That's another cannabinoid that the plant makes. And these cannabinoids, whether they're our own cannabinoids or coming from the plant, they act on our bodies. We have receptors, which are like locks for these keys. And once these receptors get activated by either the plant cannabinoid or our own cannabinoid, there are physiological effects, meaning, without having to think about what's going on, our body responds to these cannabinoids. So it may respond by decreasing certain neurotransmitters in the brain, thereby helping with depression, helping with anxiety. It may help with the spasticity and work on the muscle membrane, thereby, helping with patients with multiple sclerosis or various spastic disorders like my father had. So science has really been progressive over the past 40 to 50 years in the cannabinoid field. And we as scientists and physicians and what we call bench researchers, who are the ones who have labs and who are, working hard to figure things out, there's a big push in the US to have cannabis removed from Schedule 1, just as Dr. Christian said, so that we can get more federal money, we can get more research money to really, really study all of the nuances of the cannabis plant. That as we've talked about in the historical context, date back to 12,000 years ago.
All right, so that was a good overview of what cannabis does for us. And I think I'll add a little bit from kind of similar to what Dr. Woodson talked about. But basically, I think one of the questions that we hear quite a bit is how can one plant help with so many medical problems? You know, it helps with glaucoma, it helps with pain, it helps with sleep issues. And the reason, which I think Dr. Woodson talked about, is that we have this systems, this endocannabinoid system, and this system has these receptors that are found in multiple areas within our body. And in fact, we know that some of the receptors of the cannabinoids are the most abundant J protein receptors in our body, which is this keys that Dr. Woodson is talking about, which allows our physiology to function. And as she talked about, the function or the main function of what the endocannabinoid system does is homeostasis or balance of systems. So when you take your physiology, the function of how healthy you are is just balancing of systems, right? So for example, there has to be a balance between oxidation and anti-oxidation. There has to be a balance between making enzymes, catabolism or anabolism, or breaking down enzymes. And all of that processes are modulated by your endocannabinoid system. So we actually know that when you have endocannabinoid deficiency, when your own cannabinoid systems are not working very well, those conditions can lead to, or they've been found to shown in individuals that have fibromyalgia, chronic migraine, and other disease states, which leads to pain. And even in the context of embryology, when a baby is being formed in the womb, there is the endocannabinoid systems are responsible for the implantation of the small cell, the blastocyte. So when a baby is initially formed, there's a little cell that's formed and that get implanted into the womb. So that is actually involved the endocannabinoid system. And as Dr. Woodson talked about, this endocannabinoids that we make, the ones that we make, the reason why we don't get high off our own cannabinoids is that when we make, it'll be great, right? If you make your own, why don't you get your high? But the reason why we don't get high from our own cannabinoids is that when you make your own cannabinoids, it get broken down. Once it hits a target and it starts doing its work, it get broken down by enzymes. And the interesting thing that we also know about this endocannabinoids, the ones that we make, there's two main ones. One is called the anandamide and one is called 2-AG. And it turns out that anandamide is actually a lot of anandamide is found in breast milk. Which makes a lot of sense. So nature is clever where, a kid is irritated, they're crying. As soon as you put them on the breast, they calm down. So imagine having a kid who is irritated on a breast. So it looks like, Mother Nature knows what they're doing with all of these processes. And one of the things that I want to say about this endocannabinoid system is that even though we have all these receptors everywhere in our body, they're in the place that controls your pain, your mood, your appetite, some secretions. So that's why we use cannabis for chlorella. It helps increase your appetite. It can impair your memory. It can help with cognition and all of those things. Very interestingly, we don't have the cannabinoids or cannabis receptors in the place that controls your respiration or your breathing. And why this is very important is that when it comes to what we have now as a pain physician, we all know about the problems we have with opioids. And a lot of people are dying from opioids. We know that the reason why people die from opioids is that we have the opioid receptors in the place that controls your breathing. So that's what happens. People use opioids, it binds to those sites, and then it stops your breathing. Inherently, cannabis doesn't have that. So nobody can die from overdose of cannabis. It can get you very high, it can get you very impaired, but you're not gonna die from cannabis. So even from a pain medicine standpoint, there is this safety inherent mechanism built into these endocannabinoid systems that helps with modulating how we feel. Again, I think we'll talk more about this. I'll let Bobby also chime in with his experience with how cannabis helps with the medicinal benefit of cannabis.
Don't forget the unmute button, Mr. Ras Bobby. Press the unmute. Good.
Good night again. Yes, well, Caribbean people, I think, and Rasta people in particular, have used cannabis freely for a numberless amount of ailments. You know, for example, the use of cannabis for asthma, um, bronchitis, just to make simple infusions of it. So it's, you know, we really appreciate the scientific description of the herb because we know the herb is full of nutrients. And our people have recognized that from a long, long time ago and have used the plant in diverse ways. You know, so some people soak it in alcohol. Again, all the properties that we say that is in the herb can simply be made in a tincture form. And in that way, you know, the alcohol would extract the properties. And then a little bit like a teaspoon, you know. With Rasta people, through our experience, we know the amounts, you know, so there are certain unwritten laws that come as a result, you know, is considered as a result of the use of our people seeing a certain herb and even all herbs in general, but that herb in particular as a sacrament within the faith. And even making teas, as we say, it's not just about smoking a split. You know, even in this moment, I don't even smoke weed for months right now. You know, so people talking about being um, like chronic or you know, that kind of like you can't stop using it, but that is not true. So I'm saying there's just a natural realization, you know, that of the power of that herb, you know, and we just intuitively know the power of it, and it came about as a result of years of practicing the use of that. So we would use herb as part of a vegetable juice, for example. You know, we could mix it with some spinach and some um, kale and just blend it together. And then we would make what we call a chlorophyll drink. So it's not just about smoking weed, my brothers and sisters. And we know when we do it in that way with the water, it refreshes our body, so it removes the mucus, you know, and for pain, we pound it together with aloe and a little coconut and band on our foot, and in that way extract the poisons, you know, and heal the sores, you know. So for the use of glaucoma, in treating people who have tumors like cancers, and so would also use the herb, you know, use it as tea, use it as a tincture, use it as chlorophyll, you know. So it's a real thing, you know. It's unfortunate that things happen in the past, but at the same time, I don't really want to overemphasize it. It just shows the wisdom of the tribe, you know, the wisdom of the community, you know. So, and for many other reasons, for people who cannot eat, anorexic people, they use the herb, they eat more food. People who cannot sleep, they use the herb and they fall asleep. Some might have to use a teaspoon, some might have to use a tablespoon. You know, some might have to use 2 tablespoons, depending on how addicted, so-called addicted they are. Not addicted really, but just a kind of affinity to the holy herb. And it gives them meditation. I mean, I'm 65 well now, I feel as youthful as ever. And for a while I used the herb every day. And even up to now, I use it in teas, and nothing happened to me up to now. you know. So I just want to say that for the people out there, it's time that we remove this taboo, because it's basically a racist taboo, you know, all the time. You know, these people used to tell their own people that the cannabis does make the black people wild, and they've just put one against the other, you know, and we still persisted, and then over a period of time, the whole community realized, wow, for true, the healing of the nation. And what I say is not ganja alone, you know, don't get me wrong, you know, it's not ganja alone. Many other herbs, you know, even on a biblical level, you know, because we have to understand where we're coming from. So we're coming with an Ethiopian and Nubian realization that the herbs, all of them, because all of them have nutrients in them, you know. A disease is caused by too little or too much of certain minerals. So we have to replenish ourselves with the foods, and the ganja is food. So we put it in different forms. My own daddy had issues with sleeping, and we get some weed and we boil it with alcohol and get the real resin out of it, and we give it to him, and he fall asleep. He used to fall asleep every night just with a little bit under his tongue. You know, so as the brothers and sisters were describing the aspect of the endocannabinoid system, and so the CBD and the THC, I want the people to know that they're talking about CBD only, because like there seems to be some mission to allow some people to bring forth with the so-called CBD concept. But with Rasta people now, it's a different vibe, because it's like we're like a tribe and we have a way of life. And the whole plant have to be considered, you know, for us. So they should allow us to do our thing, because it's really bringing to that kind of popularity, you know, recognizing the heights with the herb. And so they have to give us leeway. In Antigua, they allow them man to plant the weed. They allow them man to plant the weed freely. I was in a plantation with thousands of plants. The Prime Minister said, for the way we've treated you all from a long time, even if it's not us that was the president at the time, or the Prime Minister at the time. But now we're apologizing on behalf of all governments in the past who've treated you all so bad. And now they're allowing us now, in on an Antigua level, to plant the weed freely, because that is our culture, and they include us in a multilateral agreement to produce ganja freely, and they give them licenses for free. You know, that is the kind of repertory that I don't want to overemphasize it, but this is the thing we have to really get to go, because it's we that know how to plant weed, it's we that know how to use weed. If they're looking for guinea pigs um, in terms of trying to figure out what we do, people, the Rasta community is the ideal set of guinea pigs to look at, in this time. Look at the Rastas. They've been doctors, legislators, lawyers, doctors who are Rasta people, living that life every day and living consciously and freely. So it's a spiritual aspect to it, it's a cultural aspect to it, it's a ethnic aspect to it, it's a Rasta aspect to it, you know, that we cannot forget, and to just give the honors to the people who popularize this thing, and to consider the tribulation bestowed unto them, and the need to have a conversation in terms of the reparative justice for people who've lost their family over a split, over couple split, go to jail for years. And when they come back, their wife live and go away with somebody else. and how much tribulation. You know, but I really happy to hear the scientific description of the herb. I myself have studied a lot about it, so I don't have too much more to say because it was so brilliantly delivered. But the ganja is a real thing. That is why when the people use it, they feel a vibe because cannabinoid centers need cannabinoids and the plant produces it naturally, you know, and it gives the people a nice feeling. But some people don't like us to feel that euphoria and they're trying to tell us it's only CBD. But I'm telling you, it's not only CBD, it's THC also. Because the THC is what gives you the smile and what gives you the joy. And in healing, the people have to feel happy. If they feel happy, they'll heal easier, they'll heal better. You know, it's a real thing, you know, and black people just have to embrace what is theirs, what is ours. They're trying to say it's everybody else, you know, that bring the herb. It's we that bring the herb, you know. So we have to embrace that. Now it's time to make money. Let's come together and set up businesses together and sell the herb. Other people doing it already, you know. So it's a real thing. Let's take this thing serious and just even in considering the leadership, then the leadership have to direct the flow, you know. We need a big corporation of black people to have some nice ganja business too. We can make garments too. And if we don't know how to do it, we can teach ourselves how to do it. Do courses for that. Mr. Janelle, thanks for the conversation.
And I also wanted to add a little bit to what Ras Bobby said in terms of how it's used and the different formulations. And one of the things that we know about how cannabis work in terms of its pharmacology is, it's not just the cannabinoids. So the effect of the cannabis itself is just not the cannabinoids, but something we call terpenes. So terpenes in combination of, cannabinoids, I think Ras talked about sativa and indica. So there's specific terpenes that gives the cannabis its particular feel. So there is some that are good for pain. So there is a terpene called beta-caryophyllene. This is something that's found in pepper. So it's not just, the terpenes are things that are actually found in nature. So he's talking about coconut, even mango has something called myrcene. So when you combine myrcene with cannabinoids, it has more sedative type response that you can use it for anxiety. There is other terpenes called limonene, which is also found in lime. So when you combine lime with cannabinoids, you combine lavender with cannabinoids, it gives you a different specific properties. There is even falinolol, which is actually, it's good, it's pinene, alpha-pinene, which is one of the cannabinoids that actually helps clear your mind. So pine trees, when you combine pine, the things that are in pine with cannabinoids, it actually makes it clear. So in terms of even using cannabis for medicine, if we want somebody to kind of have a clear way of thinking, creative, if you use something that has more alpha-pinene, you tend to have different results. If somebody have spasticity or spasms, as Dr. Woodson was talking about, if you have cannabinoids that has a lot of myrcene, that is actually good for relaxation and things of that nature. And then the other thing that also I think is important to kind of point out is that with those, because we have our own endocannabinoid states, everybody have a little bit of difference in terms of how they respond to this. So it's actually a function of really paying attention to your body, kind of knowing how to use it the right way, having had the experience. So I think this is something that, in this context, as we talk about these issues, can also make sure that people understand how to use this safely, and make sure that, cannabis is safe, but there is some issues we have to think about for people who are naive to cannabis, not in the right way. That's why, I think we have all these issues of, federal government looking at this substance as such a bad thing because it caused a problem for a few people who are already to begin with have psychiatric issues. So I think we also have to think about the potential side effect of cannabis when we're having these discussions, and make sure that when this is applied to the general population, how do we make it that people are using it the right way?
And I wanted to add to Dr. Christian, what he's describing, we use the terminology, it's called the entourage effect. And so the entourage effect is the concept that there's no one ingredient or one chemical in the plant that will do one specific thing better than when all of the chemicals in the plant are working together as Ras Bobby said, the whole plant concept. And so you have the cannabinoids, which are the most familiar part to the layperson or someone who's just starting to kind of understand, oh, THC, oh, CBD. Okay, I've kind of heard about that. And also the terpenes, terpenes are what you smell. So those who may grow their own plant know that that particular strain smells a little bit more lemony. And they know that that lemon scent is going to translate into how they feel. But you may not just have a lemon scent. You may have lemon plus mango scent or lemon plus pine scent. So there are multiple strains of the cannabis plant. And we, in the cannabis industry, they call them cultivars. And so, when we start getting to the conversation where we're talking about what's in the dispensaries or what the growers can actually grow, it becomes a very regimented industry. And I have found that to be very interesting, because when I talk to my patients and they ask about cannabis, or I bring it up, hey, have you ever thought about cannabis as a treatment? They say, well, well. And I say to them, we here in the islands, we use moringa, we use neem, we use various, or soursop, for various indications. Cannabis falls in that same category. So it can be used for different conditions, medically, different conditions emotionally, different conditions psychologically. And what I say to patients or to people who say, well, what about all the problems that it can cause for the communities? Well, to me, the problem that thousands of Black and brown people have been incarcerated over this, that's a much bigger problem for me, and as a Black female physician, I think it's very important to bring that side of the conversation to the table, because we know that the plant is relatively safe for most people. Yes, there are some outliers who may have the psychiatric issues, like Dr. Christian said. Of course, we don't want your dog getting into, an edible brownie and having issues, or a child getting into those. So when you talk about the industry of cannabis now, there are a lot of protective measures that come into place when you talk about the industry. And that's different than just growing your plants in your yard or in your grow room in your house. And so I thank Senator Serow, because I think it's important that we start to talk about, the medical side of it and the pharmacology of it, just like we would talk about the medical side of white willow bark, which was the precursor for aspirin or acetylsalicylic acid, or, soursop, we know here in the islands can put you to sleep, but it also has anti-cancer properties if you boil down the leaves. So there are various aspects. I mean, this conversation could honestly go on for a week. I know we don't have that time, but there are just so many angles. And what I ask of patients and of our community virtually, wherever you're looking, is to learn more about the plant, learn more about it, and not from the standpoint of, oh, I'm going to buy something from the guy on the corner. That's not what this is about anymore.
Thank you. So there's a cancer registry by law in the Virgin Islands. I'm not sure if you guys are aware. We did a status check, and it's a pretty outdated but they're trying to catch up. So the last set of data that I have is from 2016. And ranking number 1 was prostate cancer. This is territory-wide. Prostate cancer was number 1, breast cancer number 2, colon cancer number 3, blood and lymph node cancer number 4, and uterus cancer number 5. And I think right now is a very important time to be having this conversation when at least the immediate uncertainty of our healthcare system with the Cancer Institute being closed. And we know that these numbers in 2016 have, I don't know, they've grown. I don't know to what extent, but the numbers for 2020, I'm sure have increased from 2016. And so as the industry begins to expand in the territory and we offer community-wide access to the benefits of cannabis from I don't want to use the word ignorance, for someone who's not yet a patient, let's say I'm not yet a patient, but there's an ailment, how do you foresee the medical community proceeding in the industry in terms of having that patient dialogue in a normal sense, the way you would have it if you were, let's say, going to prescribe me extra strength Tylenol?
Well, I'll answer that first. I think it's very important. What brought me to cannabis was just, patients started asking me about it. And I'm like, I don't quite, I'm supposed to be the expert and I don't really know that much about it. So I took it upon myself to find out. And as medical doctors, to hold a medical license in various states, you have to complete what's called continuing medical education, or CME. So I went online and started looking for various CME courses, and there weren't that many. And I was surprised that, it just wasn't a big long list of places that I could go as a physician to learn more about these. I eventually found a place and had a wonderful experience educating myself. But I think it's really up to we as physicians and as clinicians have to make that decision that, hey, cannabis is here to stay. Over 37 states, territories in the District of Columbia have legalized it. It's not going anywhere. Patient use is going to go up. And guess what? There's a whole lot of scientific benefits to the plant, so it's not just something that's going to pass in the night. But I think we as physicians have to unwrap our brains from, oh, is my DEA license going to be on the line? Am I going to get in trouble for talking about this? No, we're not. Right, Dr. Christian? We're not. And I think that's very important. That's really what I want to bring to the physicians here, is that it's very important whether you decide to write the letters of certification or not for your patients. If you're a neurologist, you can certify your traumatic brain injury patients, your multiple sclerosis patients. If you're an oncologist, you can certify your cancer patients. But it has to be that we want to provide the best care. And if something is impacting the medical industry to the level that cannabis is, why wouldn't you want to know that?
Not to interject, sorry, Dr. Christian, not to interject, but I want to add a part B to the discussion, which would be, what are the discussions as a follow-up question within like the medical board among the other physicians in moving in that direction? And then, of course, the convo can proceed.
I'm not an expert to answer that. I'm aware that there is a physician on the medical board, the Cannabis Advisory Board. Is that what you mean? Or the Board of Medical Examiners?
Just within the physician community, what are the discussions that's being had within, among, not the cannabis board per se, but there's a Board of Medical Examiners, there's a medical society board. What, I don't know if you guys have meetings, but what are your discussions within that arena on the use of cannabis? That's just part B to Simone's part A.
I'm not certainly not speaking as an expert or a representative. I'm putting that disclaimer out there because I don't sit on any of those boards. But just through my informal conversations, that's some of the questions that I get. I may have an interest in it, but where do I learn about it? Yeah, some of my patients are talking about it, but I'd much rather focus on this. They'll figure it out. And so for me, I think it's going to be very important for us here in the territory as physicians, and in various states, to bring a level of education to us that's unbiased, that has relevance, that has scientific merit, that may be brought by some other physicians from other states, or other literature from other states. But I think we need to advance that within our agendas for the various societies and boards. That's for sure.
And I can also comment on that because I've actually been I'm in Pennsylvania. I practice in Pennsylvania. I've also previously been in the Virgin Islands and practiced pain there. So here I've been doing this since 2018. And the process, I guess every state is different. So this is something, and I think we talked about cannabis still being a Schedule I substance. So according to the FDA, if you're a physician, you cannot prescribe it. So to get away from prescribing cannabis, we recommend cannabis. So it becomes a function in my state of Pennsylvania, it becomes a function of the state to create the cannabis program. And then physicians are empowered to be able to recommend cannabis without feeling like the license is going to be taken away. So I think to the point that Dr. Wilson talked about, it's very important for physicians to understand the education and the science behind cannabis, because this is something that we did not even talk about in medical schools, right? I got out of medical school not too long ago, and we were not talking about the endocannabinoid system. And we've known about the endocannabinoid system for a long time. It was just taken out of the curriculum. So even a lot of physicians don't even understand what this endocannabinoid system is, which is something that is actually very significant to our physiology. Basically, this is what makes us healthy. This is what keeps us in balance. You get out of balance when your endocannabinoids are off. And we know that for sure, that individuals who have the enzymes that breaks down your own cannabinoids faster, they actually end up having more pain. So in migraine, in endometriosis, in fibromyalgia, all of those states, we know that when there's this imbalance, yet none of this stuff is talked about in medicine. And I think it is very important, to the very point that Dr. Wilson made, that if we really want to help our patients, it's on us to go and educate ourselves. There's tons of education out there, that we have tons of literature, even from the National Academy of Science. And then also, Simone talked about this, there is other countries who are way advanced when it comes to cannabis science. And Israel is one of those. So in Israel, they have a federal cannabis program. The guy who discovered the THC cannabinoids, Dr. Meshalem, he's Israeli and he's still around. So a lot of countries have had advanced programs and that we can look to try to help us educate ourselves. And I think definitely this is something that every physician should, at least, even if you're not interested in recommending cannabis, become familiar with it, because your patient may come to you and ask about, how can they explore this as an adjunct? And for me, I also got into this cannabis medicine, or started doing cannabis medicine through my patient. I had a patient who had cerebral palsy, and she has this spasms and she's shaking all the time. She's a young person. And all the stuff we've done, I've done injections, we've done Botox, we've done all these medicines, nothing is working. And this is before cannabis became legal in the state of Pennsylvania. And her mom took her to Colorado and she got cannabis, used it, her hand went, they videotaped it for me. She used it, her hand is always shaking, and we've done all this stuff. It went away. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So definitely we know that there's benefits. And I will also recommend that, physicians within this platform really take it on themselves to learn from what we know. We can also learn from, herbalists, people who've had connection to the root of where this is coming from. So, Raz Bobby have a lot of experience. So I even think it would be better to connect all of that, to go learn from other people who have had this experience to help us do the best we can for our patients.
So before we get to Bobby, so Dr. Christian, what you're saying is that as policymakers, we need to also create the atmosphere for physicians to be able to do their job as well within the realm of prescribing cannabis, correct?
Absolutely. And then in addition to that, and I think we've all spoken about that and Bobby have talked about, is to make sure that it also protected in a way that patients have access to it, that it doesn't cost so much because, and even, there are states where, they've had it where patients can grow their own specific amount. And again, this will become a function of what the policymakers decide there. But outside of making it easy for doctors to do it, also make it easy for patients to have access to it.
Thank you. Ms. Bobby? Don't forget, we have to unmute my friend, Bobby, unmute.
Yes, you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so what we have to remember is we have to start from where we are, We have to look for the experiences of the people who on the ground have used the cannabis for a long time. So what I'm saying is that the experiment has been done, but the information has not been consolidated. You see? So I'm saying right at our feet, we have the means for finding out what, the experience of the cannabis, and what I saying too is that as we go along, we'll obtain the strategy to bring the information to the people, in terms of the taboo, because people are afraid. You see, we have a situation with COVID-19 right now. In our culture, cannabis is one of the herbs that help with the immune system. So the neem plant is another one. So I'm just saying the combining them together and making juices with them can help with the situation. But because of the taboo, none can be grown and none is available. But we have to realize that is our culture and they can't dictate to us all the time how things are supposed to be. But, let's just do what we have to do for the thing to be right, And the reason why the ganja is so, they have certain strains, for certain cancers. They have certain strains for certain cancers, and they have certain strains for diabetes, and they have certain strains for specifically cancer of the pancreas or pancreas cancer. There's a professor in Jamaica called Dr. McLaughlin. He's a PhD in studies like in zoology and botany and so. And them telling you that there's a scientific proof that it's not just the CBD that is the good part of the herb. The THC is also very important. So they can't keep fooling us and keep depriving us of the things that we need because of a notion, because it's really racism, that caused them to pass laws against cannabis from a long time. They say that when they tell the women when the black man use cannabis, he does rape. They just end up, being like animals. And these things were not true, So they use a racist lie to bring that about. And so we can't allow them to keep dictating to us how we should be, what we should be. There is a herb, there is a lot of money involved in this, And as we speak, there is no consideration. These people had meetings with us And we tell them about our sacramental considerations and aspects, you know. And then people say there is a Christian society and where the Christianity when it comes to Rasta, you know. And it's not only Rasta, the natural healers. Natural healers are supposed to be able to use that herb as freely as they are accustomed to from a long time. So it's a misunderstanding. As we say, it's a misunderstanding in terms of the herb. Now they find out that the herb is the real thing, the herb has been rediscovered. So what we're gonna do? You have to allow the herbalists, the natural healers, to use the herb freely to heal their patients, because that's what they've been accustomed to doing. Give them some tea, make some vegetable juice, you understand? And especially you see, they have herbs that are water herbs and there are herbs that are oil herbs. Certain herbs you can get certain oils from. Other herbs you can't get no oil from them. So those that oily, ganja is one of them. So the soaking of the weed in coconut oil, for example, or olive oil, brings out the properties from the weed. And so you can take a minute amount over a period of time of soaking and put it under the tongue of the patient to heal them. So in terms of abuse and abuse not, there is a way of life our people, and when I say our people, not only Rasta people alone, you know, because a lot of what Rasta doing is really a memory of what our old people used to do, you know, cook on tree stone and Aital, because that's what they had at the time. So the way of life just continue progress and reach a point now. All over the place is vegetarian restaurant. The same thing, that consciousness come with the use of the herb, you know, and them man, you know, use the herb in diverse ways, because you can make a brownie. I myself, I do use brownie, you know, brownie to strong. You understand? Because you have to know how much you're using. So I understand there have to be an understanding of how much you use and if you use it at all. Because as we say, if people crazy and they use the weed, they'll end up being more crazy. So I understand that. But of itself, the use of the herb does calm you down. It just mellow you out. You see? But now the thoughts of the people now, if they derange in their thoughts, then they go act a certain way. So that comes the psychological aspects now, you know. But the herb is a very, very serious thing. It's actually a spiritual thing, you know. And we have to look for, you know, you have to look for the people that you treat bad. So I know Sister Janelle, you're in the den right now, so we have to talk to you and tell you have to look out for us, because it's a way of life, it's a culture. You know? I remember when the times when one of the governors was the governor, he used to come to our agriculture fair and see the wheat plant and do us anything, because he knew it was our culture. So, and in those times it was so-called illegal. You know? They decriminalized. What Rasta saying is that our position is that it's supposed to be legalized. And if it don't legalize, it's supposed to be legalized for us to a certain extent. You know, we should have our leeway to do our thing instead of having to get things from abroad. And it's a big, as you know, it's a big trafficking out there. You know? So if the people are supposed to be able to have their 10, 15 plants, 20 plants for themselves by their home. You know, because what is our culture, what we're so scared of. You know? And the people to look for to help you understand how to use it, again, it's the same people who have been using it. So we cannot underestimate ourselves and figure we don't know how to do this thing. We know how to do this thing, but some people take our culture now. They come and they take our culture now. And now they're making all the money with the culture. And we ain't making none. So what you gonna do? You know? So it's we have to look for ourselves and figure the thing out and know what we're gonna do. Because are we going to give licenses to people who just waiting to spend the big money and then the money doesn't get funny? You know? So that's
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. I think that's good for now because I don't really want to be the only one to talk too much.
Well, we were getting some questions in. So you were talking about that, you know, there's been, it's a part of a culture that has been used for forever. And, but there's a group or there's members in the community that don't know the benefit. So before I get into the questions that's coming in, if we could just mention some of the ailments that cannabis can address. How would it, what's the difference between receiving it in a plant form versus the oil form? How would how would you know what to use for what ailment? If we could kind of have that conversation before we go into, I have a list of questions here coming in on the live. So if we could just touch on that a little bit before we go to the questions.
Okay. You hearing me?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so with the cannabis plant, you can use it in diverse ways, as we say. So if you choose to use it in the oil form, you can start with some drops, like you soak it in the coconut oil, and there's a certain temperature that you soak it at, and I'm giving out my recipe just so. And then you get the oil and you use it in drops, a drop at a time, 2 drops, 3 drops, until you know what you can tolerate, because it have the other side of the effects too, like it can make certain people drowsy or whatever. That's because of the sedative aspects of it. In certain times now, you make tea with it. You boil the water and you draw it. And you may want to draw like a tablespoon or two to a cup of water. Because it is oil soluble with the water, it will not get you high, quote unquote. Understand? So you can draw it like that. Another way you can do it is that you can use cannabis in combination with herbs to make vegetable juices. So you make what you call the chlorophyll drink. The chlorophyll drink is actually a bush drink. So if you have diabetes, you will use the neem plant with the cannabis plant and blend them together. You see, and in that way you get a drink. You get a chlorophyll drink. And if you have a bad leg, you get the oil of it and you rub the leg, or you mix it with some aloes and pound the aloes, mix it with the coconut oil and tie it on the wound. It's a very sacred plant. It's a pure plant. It's very alkaline. So some of the best ways to use the plant is if it's fresh. But because of the stigma, there's not enough around. I'm not advocating to be a rebel and just to talk stupidness. I'm just talking about the reality. I guess I'm an idealist sometimes. Excuse me for that, but if it was how it should be, then.
Dr. Christian, Raz Bobby spoke about like if you have a bad leg using the oil, and I know that you do a lot of work in rehabilitation. So how are you seeing that you can recommend already where you're at? How do you go about that with your patients?
Yes, and I will talk briefly about, you asked the question of what conditions you can use cannabis for, and it's actually a lot of conditions. So from, autism to anorexia, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, from stroke, from brain injury, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, diabetes. So the benefit of cannabis for multiple conditions exist: anxiety, depression, even for schizophrenia. So we know that high levels of CBD helps with schizophrenia and other things like that. From how I, in my state, since, and I think maybe, the Virgin Island have an opportunity to just decide how they're going to do this. But here we have a dispensary that kind of make the cannabis, and basically it comes in different forms. It comes in the actual flower itself, so you can get the herbs itself and use it that way. Which a lot of patients use. Some patients are not comfortable with that because they don't like the idea of using the smoke or using vaporizers. It also comes in vaporization. It also comes in tincture, which Ras Bobby was talking about. So there's a way to extract it where you can figure out the ratio of THC, CBD, and other terpenes for the entourage effect. You can also make it in a topical cream. So somebody wrote here butter. So for a lot of patients who may not want to, a lot of my older patients, they just want to try the topical creams for pain, which works really well. There is capsules, there is suppositories. So there's all these formulations that we can make cannabis in to help with patients. And how I do in terms of people coming to me for specific management is we talk about their conditions and what they're trying to address. And based on that and based on their goals, then we can come up with what will be the good ratio for, the THC versus CBD, because we know THC is psychoactive, or THC can cause impairment. So some people during the day, if they want to go to work, they want to drive and all of that, they cannot use THC. So then we give them less THC, more CBD. And then during nighttime, where they can be at home, they don't have to go anywhere, we can give them a high dose of THC, which helps with sleeps. And people wake up, they feel great. They don't have any hangovers like the other medicines we have. And then even during the daytime, we can explore topical creams for individuals, so then they can still function without, not feeling psychoactive or high. And again, that's a level of, people, there's some people that are naive to cannabis. So those people cannot tolerate higher doses of THC. And then there's people who can have higher doses of THC up to 50 milligrams and can still function. So overall, it's trying to look at what is the patient goals, how do we get them to use it in the right way or the safe way so that it can still function. Me being a rehab physician, for my patient, it's all about function. What do you want to do? If you want to be able to do stuff during the day, if you want to relax, if you want to meditate, maybe you can use more THC that can help you with that state of mind. And for my patient, going back to the question you just asked, if somebody have leg problems or pain, there is a benefit of cannabis for nerve pain or neuropathic pain. And then people that have spasticity from stroke or from spinal cord injury, where they have all this tightness of the muscles. This is how we can, we can find specific chemovar, which Dr. Woodson talked about, which is something that has the proportion of cannabinoids with terpenoids and flavonoids in the right proportion, increasing the number of myrcin you have in that particular combination so that it helps with spasticity. If it's for anxiety, we want to increase the CBD because some people can even get more anxious when they have too much THC. So it's all a function of really understanding what the patient needs are and then coming up with the right regimen and the right combination to help with that.
And I'd also like to add, based on what Senator Serow had asked, how do we as physicians get educated on this? Understand that when we go to traditional medical school, what we learn in pharmacology, there are a couple of concepts. There's one called pharmacokinetics and there's pharmacodynamics, okay? Which basically means, with drug X that a patient is going to take, how long does it take to get through their system? What else can act or detract from that medication? whether it be some other medical condition or another medication. But what I try to share with my patients in my integrative medicine practice is that one size does not fit all. Okay, so as I work with patients with herbs and with supplements and with things like that, it's not just, 30 milligrams for you is going to be the same 30 milligram. We have to remove that whole concept, I think, when it comes to cannabis. And it really is that fine tuning that you have to really come down and make it personalized to your client or to your patient. There are some, I have friends in other states who have their medical cannabis cards, and they may find, hey, one particular strain works better for me for my condition of, knee pain. And I like to do it as a topical, or I found this particular brand that I like that works better than the other brand, even though milligram to milligram, they may say the exact same thing. Remember the entourage effect. So, one product may have different terpenes, they may have different flavonoids, which we did not talk about. Flavonoids are, think of vitamin C, vitamin A, those sorts of things are flavonoids, which really help. They're part of the plant, and they help with anti-cancer properties, antiviral properties, antibacterial properties. So what I like to help patients focus on as we start to craft the conversation around medicinal cannabis here in the Virgin Islands is that one size does not fit all. You have to start low and go slow. Just like Ross Bobby was saying, you can't, take the whole 30 milliliter bottle of tincture and be like, okay, I'm gonna, it's not a 5-hour energy drink. That's not what we're doing here. And I really tell folks that you need to get an idea of just what works best for you. I think a lot of patients have a lot of fear around it because it's fear of the unknown. Everybody fears what they don't know and what they don't understand. So whether the patient is going to sit down with an herbalist such as Ross Bobby or his equivalent in another state, or a physician like myself or Dr. Christian, or if they sit down with their friends who may be growers, who may have found the certain strains that they like. And the growers have a lot of knowledge, just like the patients have a lot of knowledge. So this isn't, the doctors telling the patients what to do. We need to remove that from our mind. We're not the ones who are always going to be sitting and telling the patients to do this. We're your guide, but hey, if you find a particular chemovar, cultivar, or strain that you like, hey, let us know. And, we may be able to identify somebody who can grow that for you. Or you may be able to identify, hey, I have my cousin so-and-so who grows, and I found some seeds for this strain. Within the VI law, that person can become your caregiver. And they can grow a certain number of plants for you for that purpose. So it really is a matter of trying it out. I tell my female patients, it's like going to the makeup counter, and there's Maybelline and L'Oreal and, Black Radiance. I mean, there's a whole slew of different blushes, mascaras, and yeah, they all kind of do the same thing, which is to beautify you. But one may work better for you than the next. So I think it really, to me, I'm hopeful that medical cannabis will bring back the conversation between the patient, the physician, the other providers who are in the community, bring in family members who may have more knowledge, because trust me, this is a learning curve for a lot of us. Those of us who are not Rasta and who did not grow up in that community, yes, I respect that community and I want to learn from you. That's why I love you so much, Ras Bobby. But I think it's really important to, step into it with an open mind and step into it with, hey, I need some guidance and I need some help. It may not always be from my doctor. And if that's the case, there are other people in the community who know stuff, who may not have a degree behind their name, but they have the knowledge of the plant and what it can do for you. What I tell patients is, when they say, well, what is it good for? Is it good for this? Is it good for that? You can go head to toe and it's good for all of that. The cannabis plant can be used for probably 95% of medical conditions. I'm not claiming cure, I'm not claiming anything, but I've seen it with my own two eyes with patients of mine who, they're like, oh my God, I've just been using this topical cannabis rub on my knee and my arthritis pain has gone away. Now we know as physicians, the arthritis itself is still there, but the pain connection to their brain is gone. And so whether they use it in combination with a topical and then maybe do a tincture under their tongue and its different properties of each, that's kind of the fine tuning that you have to do in concert with your caregiver and providers.
You caught me. I was just texting the senator to ask her if she was going to talk about her experience with her knee when you started to talk about pain. I was just doing a cheat sheet. I was just sending her a text.
Well, I had knee reconstructive surgery. I tore my everything, MCL, patellar tendon, everything in the knee, every tendon there was, I tore it. And I remember I was prescribed oxycodone and tramadol, I think. And I took them, talk about constipation. And it was rough, feeling nauseous. And I was like, I need something. And I was like, where is Raspberry? And I said, one of my friends, he doesn't know this, but I sent one of my friends to his shop. And they came home. My father called it the Rastaman cream, and he's like, with a cream. So what really got me through those difficult days of just immense pain, because I used to cry every single night, just going to bed, because it was the entire knee, ACL, MCL, PCL, meniscus, everything was torn. And that cream, that cannabis cream from Raspberry, thank you, really, really benefited. And now we have, some left in the house. And my father is like, they come from a very, he's watching too, by the way, but they came from a very traditional setting, as Raspberry said, where the whole Rastaman concept, and that was like, it was basically, a cardinal sin. So to get him now, he's like, what a weed cream, I need a weed cream on my foot. And I'm like, Daddy, this CBD. So, he has also seen the benefits of that. And to going to Dr. Woodson, you made a point about, that what works for somebody else. And I've never been one to smoke, because I'm a Division I athlete, and we were always drug tested, had to stay on the Schedule I drug, but to stay on a fine line. So I never really had, I never got into smoking. But one day my friends were like, oh, try this edible, because they were like, Jenna, we know you don't smoke. And I tried the edible, and it tasted like a nice brownie. So I ate the whole brownie, and I mean, I had no ailments or anything, but I remember hallucinating, and I parked my car up and I started walking. I was like, what is happening? So I definitely know that the concentration levels, it's a funny story. I started seeing like a penguin and an iguana fighting, and I was like, what in the name of God is happening? I will never take another edible again. But, I do know the properties of healing that it has, because definitely with my knee injury, I went from crying every single night to months of crying to, applying the cream from Raspberry, and it definitely made a difference for me. So thank you.
Yeah, and I also wanted to kind of chime in quickly. And as we are talking about cannabis, it is also very important to talk about impairment with cannabis. Okay, so impairment is real. You can have significant psychoactivity. It's not permanent, but that's something that people need to be aware of. So again, it makes a lot of sense for you to start slow, know your limit, because we also don't want you to get impaired behind a vehicle. We don't want you to get impaired trying to do specific activities that's going to end up causing more problems for you. So, this may be a different discussion, but there is some side of benefit. There is huge benefit of cannabis, but it can also cause problems for a lot of people. This is not for everybody. So when my patients come to see me, I tell them this works for a lot of people, but it also doesn't work for everybody. Just like any other, sometimes some herbs or specific medicines don't work for specific people. So again, this is something that needs some directions to make sure that this is personalized or individualized, as Dr. Wilson talked about. And let's be real about the impairments that can happen. If you haven't used cannabis before, you want to be careful of what you're using. The good thing is you're not going to die from it. Unlike an opioid or something else, you may just get too high. Eventually, it's going to pass away. And I even tell my patient, those who haven't used cannabis before, I just tell them, if you get too high, calm down, drink some water, drink some lemon, something to cool yourself down, especially those who have not used it before. So all of those education is also important for people who have worries about exploring cannabis, especially those who are naive to it. And then also discussing some of the interactions. And the great thing about cannabis, again, is there is limited interaction with medicines. So there's a few medicines that we know that interact with cannabis. One of them is a medicine we use for kids, clobazam. Outside of that, really, you can use it with anything else. Obviously, if you're using something that's more sedating or makes you sleepy, and in combination with cannabis, you may feel more sleepy, but it's not known to cause any specific injury to your kidney or to your liver or any of those things. So overall, I think we didn't even talk about that, but it's also something that relatively safe, which means that, in contrast to taking ibuprofen or Tylenol, any of those things, cannabis we know that it doesn't cause any systemic side effect.
Thank you. And that's why I think that having this conversation in the open is so important, so that people can begin to ask questions freely without the feel of shame or, embarrassment. Ask questions about cannabis, or, be able to inquire with a physician, with an herbalist, and not have that feeling of taboo where it has to be a conversation within closed doors, because the whole concept really should be to maximize the health benefits for the community. That should be the focus of the industry coming online. With that, I want to go to the questions that are coming in on the live. I want to start with this one, but oh boy. Okay, let's just go straight in. Someone asked about cannabis with children on the autism spectrum, and I just want to expand it past the autism spectrum and just children in general. I watched the Sanjay Gupta documentary and Charlotte's Web. That was just like, wow to me. So can we talk about cannabis with children?
I can start from there. So we also, actually, I do have some kids who have autism, who have all these behavior issues. They have seizures, they have sleep, they have behavior, things that none of the medicines they've tried for them works. And some, from what we've learned, we don't like to use too much THC in kids. There's some literature that show that this can really impact their brain functioning. But I have a few of these kids that the only thing that really calms them down, it's actually having something that has a little bit higher THC. For a parent who have tried everything else, all these medicines, they've traveled to all these medical centers. I actually had a kid who just came back recently from being at Johns Hopkins for 2 months to kind of get this kid to behave and all of these things. Came back home, kids went back to the same type of behavior. We just started her on cannabinoids, added some THCA in addition to the THC. So there's different cannabinoids. And I guess, we talked briefly about some of the properties. So now there's kids, according to the parents, the kids is not hitting them anymore. The kids is able to kind of stay calm, go throughout the day. I've had a few kids who also had seizures. that they couldn't treat, where they were having seizures multiple times throughout the day. They were on multiple medications. None of that worked. We did high dose CBD, and that has been able to decrease the frequency of the seizures to a lower level. There is a lot more clinicians who have experience with autism and cannabis. My experience is limited, but from what I've seen so far, it's been a positive experience. I have some kids with ADHD that the parent also wanted to kind of switch away from the other stimulant medicines, where we've been able to use small amount of THC and CBD concentration, a 1-to-1 ratio, where the kids is able to, and with more THCA, more alpha-pinene combinations, where they were able to kind of stay more clear, and now they're doing better in school. So with my limited experience, I think it's been a positive thing for parents, because a lot of times for these kids, there's nothing else out there. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. And in fact, somebody wrote here about patients teaching us about cannabinoids. In fact, the whole movement of cannabis becoming something that physicians started paying attention to was moms taking their kids to the senator's offices and say, hey, my kid need this thing needs to be legalized. So a lot of this US states, parents have to take their kids who have autism and all these other disease states that doesn't respond to conventional medicines, that end up getting the push to really make cannabis available for kids. So there is benefits there for children with specific conditions.
Thank you for that. We have another question, and then I'm gonna go to the panel, the participants on the Zoom live. I'm just gonna ask for you to raise your hand, and then you'll get acknowledged, and then you can ask your question. But I have 2 more questions here. Someone asked about the difference between smoking and using the oil. Russ, your hand is up.
Raspberry, just unmute.
Ross, you can talk. You're actually unmuted already, right? No?
Yes, sir. Yes. Well, as all of us observing, it's absolutely the best thing to be moderate. First of all, we start with a little bit first. So everything in life is about balance. If somebody is a bigger person, they might need two drops of coconut oil, but you could start with 1 drop. The coconut oil, there is no heat, because the oil is a fat. The cannabis has an oil, so the resin it mixes naturally with the coconut oil, and it just fuses and becomes one. So all the nutrients get into the oil, and so you have your cannabis oil in that way at a certain temperature. Understand? So the smoking, I mean, every Rasta man who uses cannabis enjoys the use of cannabis. It gives you a euphoric feeling. It can make you very philosophical at the same time. So different weed will give you a different effect, all as a result of the cannabinoid contents, as it relates to you when you ingest the heat. But so the heat to me, even I have said I had the use of mine a little earlier, but it had nothing to do with smoking. I didn't smoke anything. I just blended it, and I am, before they would say that, oh, this thing's making you crazy. No, I feel blissful and still I don't feel crazy. And it's just a real thing. It's, it is a certain energy, because it's like a companion, and it has nothing to do with smoking. At the same time, some people smoke. I wouldn't condemn smokers, but all I would say is with everything, you have to be very moderate. And there is a serious problem with the smoking. They mix it with tobacco. And that is a serious problem. You know, we tell them from long time, those who teach us about natural healing tell us it's very dangerous to use tobacco. Yeah, you don't see that effect with some cannabis because if you use tobacco, it tend to make you want to keep smoking plenty and smoking plenty. And speaking from one who used to do it, you know, but it has come a time when it's a different vibe and I just blend it in coconut milk because coconut is oily, you know. So just to say, you know, people use cannabis in different ways. To me, putting it in some cake that has some coconut oil in it can give you a more negative effect than if you smoke it, because that goes to the digestive system. And as a result of that digestion, that process of digestion, it gives you that very long feeling. And if you're not accustomed, some people get paranoid. You see, people who are not accustomed could get paranoid. So again, it has to do with the amount of what you're using, or if you should use it at all. Some people, because they have a mental issue already, it amplifies it. So we have to be real about this. Sometimes it happens to certain people. With some people, it calms them down. So it's not everybody have the same problem. It's not that, you know, sometimes it's a lack of potassium. Sometimes it's a lack of iron. Sometimes it's a lack of calcium, you know. So all those conditions can be rectified with not just with the use of cannabis, but if somebody is like underfed, you know, in a state of well, I would even say poverty very often of the time, because poverty of mentality, they eat the wrong foods and they use the cannabis and it gives them a different reaction. You know, so it's multiple things, and all, as I'm saying, all these things have been experienced with it within the culture. And I guess it's a time for us to use questionnaires and certain things to find out really the experience with this wonderful herb. You know, I have treated many people with different things, but with the time, with serious pain, with even pain of cancers, cannabis is good for this. Asthma, bronchitis, glaucoma, you mix it with some plantain and eye bright and put it in the eyes for eye problems, and, to strengthen the immune system. You know, mix it together with cat's claw, you know, and astragalus. So it's, you know, it's multiple things you can do with this wonderful herb. So this herb, even on a local level, can actually be the liberation for a lot of people, you know. But to just allow rich people to come in this island and just take over the ganja industry is just sacrilegious. It's ridiculous. This thing's supposed to be for the local farmers, you know. I even understand they have a board. They have a board of directors, and the board of directors don't have one rasta, and the board of directors don't have one farmer.
Wait,
Okay.
hold on, Mr. Bobby, not to cut you off, but we amended the legislation. The governor did send on a cannabis bill that, you know, we vehemently opposed, but we changed the composition of the cannabis board to include somebody from the natural, a naturopath, which would, you would fit that description. And we also included a farmer. So it's just incumbent on the governor at this point to make those appointments to the cannabis board. But we did go back and revise the composition of the cannabis board for clarification.
All right. So well, I have to change my mindset right now.
Just let you know, we in
I
tune.
spoke with Raz Bobby today, and we're gonna, since you already known for Rockland Fellows, we're gonna meet with the farmers and have the farmers recommend who they would like to represent them and have that recommendation sent to the governor. So, Raz Bobby, we're gonna visit that. Okay, we're gonna talk offline, and we're gonna visit getting some representation on the board. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
I see a hand raised. Barbara?
Yes, good evening. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, but we like to see you. You want us to see you, Barbara?
Not tonight.
Go ahead.
Respectfully not. I was even trying to change my profile picture while we were here because Dr. Woodson's got the most beautiful shot of herself. The other doctor over there, greetings to you, and your profile picture is awesome as well. You know, you guys started making me feel like, dang, the C ain't working, huh? So, but for tonight, at this hour of the night, I do apologize. I'd like to stay unseen, if that's okay with you, Senator.
I was just pulling your legs, adding some light to it. Go ahead, Barbara.
Wonderful, wonderful. I want to say thank you to you. Honestly, this is absolutely needed, overdue, whatever you want to call it, but just happy that we're having it now. I want to say a shout out to Dr. Woodson, my #1 doctor in town when it comes to the cannabis herb. When it comes to educating on any subject matter of medicine, I will say that Dr. Woodson just has this finesse with it that makes you feel comfortable and can literally relate to whatever issues there is at hand. So for that matter, and the support that she's given to me through my, you know, journey in liberating the plant, I really, again, appreciate all of you being here. Ras Bobby, a blessing to you as well for taking it from our indigenous place here in the territory. My purpose for actually raising my hand tonight was to emphasize what most of you have been saying and really give note to the senator as well as anyone listening is the perspectives of the patient and that patient's drive on this journey in the evolution of this plant from the very onset. And I'm talking centuries, or should I say thousands of years ago, until even now. It is because of the patient that so much information has been made available. It's because of the patient that this plant has even been used in the medicinal side from the snake oil years, you know, from the medicine wagon driving around with bottles on the side. So as we continue, and I know the senator and definitely Simone have been a listening ear to the community and what has been offered or interest has been said. I think as we move forward as a medical facet through this ever growing and dynamic world, there is one element that has been present or ever present and should be not just kept at the tail end, but recognized as the head, and that's the patient. And I'll bring that home a little bit. When it comes to, and I'm saying this because I want to hear some feedback from the medical places, if there's been any direction in that. When it comes to the illnesses of our community, we have Alzheimer's, we have dementia, we have high blood pressure, we have fibrosis, we have a number. I was just diagnosed with lupus. We have autoimmune diseases. How are we intending to line our cultivation with the users? In other words, if we're going to approach this from the medical standpoint, I'd like to know, and as I've said before, I don't ask for permission for recreation. So I really want us to understand the focus of medicinal. If I'm going to create a medicinal world for patients that need this plant, are we truly growing or lining our cultivation in a way that even for those who can't grow for themselves, our research and development is taking us in a way that we could change our own medical history right here within the Virgin Islands. In other words, if we focus on the illnesses of our people and cultivate to address that, we could not only change the health of our citizens here within the territory, but drive a whole new tourism industry of medical tourism or even sharing with the rest of the world what we were able to accomplish here. I'd like to be one of those people that can proudly say we changed what diabetes looked like in the Virgin Islands by the use of cannabis. We changed what autoimmune diseases look like in the Virgin Islands because of cannabis. And not just that we made billions of dollars off of the sale of medicinal cannabis, which is going to happen anyway. So I kind of want to see some feedback from the medicinal, the physicians and the doctors and those that are out there really thinking about this from the medicine standpoint. The patients have driven this world. So are you still understanding that they should continue to drive this journey? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I think Dr. Wilson, you can also respond to this. Thanks for that feedback, and that's great. And I think for us in medicine, we only exist because of our patients, and we are always learning from patients. So that is something that we relate to, and we appreciate the opportunity to learn from our patients. Talking about developing other strains or other formulations, that would be great for the island. I think that's a great concept. But also something that I want us to kind of think about is cannabis is just one way to stay healthy. And I think Ross talked about this. The things that makes people healthy is nutrition, sleep, stress management, movement. So cannabis is not the solution to cure everything. If you're not eating right, like Ross was talking about, if you're not eating, you're not doing the right movement, if you're not exercising, if you're not doing all of those things, cannabis doesn't solve the problem. So I want us to kind of also get real about what really makes people healthy. And it's just not one modality. So this is something that adds to the process of getting healthy and making sure that we take all of that. So if you're still eating junk and you're using cannabis, your diabetes is not going to get better. So I think, we have to also kind of bring all of that in to really figure out how do we make people healthy, and using this as one of those tools that really help us to get there. So I will let Dr. Woodson chime in, but I think what you raised is an important point, but we also want to make sure that all the other things that make us healthy is being implemented as well as the cannabis program.
Thank you, Barbara. I care for you a lot, and I wish you well in your health journey, as I wish all of my patients well in their health journey. I do agree with Dr. Christian's perspective that it needs to be a holistic approach, but I think it's also an interesting concept to think about from what's called a precision medicine standpoint. Okay, so precision medicine, personalized medicine, that's another area or direction in which the medical field in the world is going. And a lot of that is based on your genetics, what's called epigenetics, epigenetics, which means the influence of your environment on your genetics. How does that broccoli that you eat with the sulforaphanes, or the eggplant that you eat that's purple and has some of those chemicals in it, where we know the purple chemicals help with different cellular functions. I think I'm going to look into that research, Barbara, because I think that I'm sure somebody else has thought of that and has started working on that. Yes. I myself am not an academic researcher. I'm not a bench researcher. I'm more of a clinician. So, as you were asking, I was thinking, wow, that could be a study that we could do. I know within our legislation that UVI is being targeted as having the initial laboratory for testing for purity, et cetera. But, perhaps we can build up, since we do have UVI right here in the territory, build up the chemistry, the biochemistry department, the biology department. Once cannabis is removed from Schedule 1, be able to get federal grant money, private grant money for research into these things. But in order to do that, you have to have, one, people who want to do that, two, financial backing to do that level of research, and three, the support of the community, because people of color don't typically enroll in clinical trials. We've seen that a lot with the COVID vaccine testing and other things. And there are whole reasons beyond that we don't need to get into, but there are just so many nuances to your comment that, got my wheels turning already. But I think it is important to think about, as I talk to my patients, we don't spend the whole time talking about cannabis. We spend a lot of time talking about nutrition and exercise and flexibility and the connection of your mind with your body. And to think about cannabis use as a tool to advance our healthcare is a very, very invigorating thought. And I think it needs to be addressed through a very strong research and development protocol.
If I may just respond, and I know there's other people waiting. Yeah, there are some specific studies that have started in other places. And I know as much as research and development does require money, the truth is the growing is already going to be taking place and the patients are already going to be taking use. So it's really a matter of taking data. And one of the things that we have strongly neglected to identify within our legislation right now, and this is something that I've talked about from the beginning, is the importance of the data that we can actually produce to change not only our own community, but other places in this world. So I appreciate your interest to even look further into this. Research and development is something that we can take a leading role in, as we have sat behind for so many others within this industry. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Carla.
Yes, ma'am, that's me. My concern is in the medical area. I would like Dr. Woodson and Christian to sort of let me know, tell us, how are they interacting with the other physicians on the island? Because too often you find that physicians tend to just want to stick to the conventional prescriptions of some tablet that they prescribe for you. And they're the ones who need to really come on board in cannabis. So I'm just trying to find out how are they interacting with their peers, things progressing, and how well are they accepting it, or do we have most of our doctors still resistant to medicinal cannabis?
I'll start from here, and I'd also like to hear Dr. Christian's perspective with physicians in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you heard at the beginning, Carla, that question kind of came up. I'm not familiar with an ongoing conversation about cannabis and its medicinal use here in the islands. That does not mean that it's not occurring, but it's not occurring in any regimented, cohesive way. And it's time to do that. I think a lot of doctors, if we don't know about something, we just don't care to know about it unless, enough people kind of come to us either through our families or through our patient population and say, hey, you need to know about this. But I also I firmly believe, as I said earlier, that cannabis is a medicinal product that can be used in your treatment plan. I think where you're going to see doctors really pick up the pace a little bit is when we get educated more. So I think doctors are not going to do anything until they feel comfortable doing it. And the way that we get comfortable doing it is by educating ourselves on it. That's just how our brains work. I'm hopeful that in the territory, through VI Medical Society, through the Board of Medical Examiners, through the Cannabis Advisory Board, that we can get a working group together, excuse me, to start talking to the doctors and getting an educational curriculum in our hands. Because I think once the stigma gets removed from it, I think you'll see a lot more doctors say, this is actually a pretty neat thing and it makes sense to me. So I would like to hear what Dr. Christian is seeing with his medical cohorts in Pennsylvania.
Yes, and I think you kind of mentioned something that is relevant to getting physicians comfortable, which is education. And even in my own hospital, I became the first one to get approved. And there is always resistance, even within healthcare systems. So even I have to go as far as going to my CEO and writing the whole proposal and the protocols, because a lot of times people don't want to do the work it takes to help patients. We all talk about, organizations having great missions and vision statement, but when it comes to the work of really trying to make a difference in patients' life, it doesn't happen. But I think to answer your questions, caller, I think what will work in the Virgin Island is really trying to get physicians to be educated about cannabis. I've done a lot of education here with my colleagues. Now I have 3 of my doctors. Part of a bigger system. 3 of them are doing it now. And it's a really great thing to have in addition to the other 2 sets that we have, especially when you do pain management, which is what I do. Because the things I have for people, the gabapentin, the tramadol, the opioids, all of those things have all these horrible side effects that people can't tolerate. And, having cannabis as an adjunct actually helps a lot more. Sometimes just the fact that people can sleep with cannabis, they heal themselves. So it's not even helping with their pain, but they're not sleeping. If they start sleeping, pain gets better. So I will hope that part of this policy will also allow for education for clinicians and physicians. And I would love to be part of that process to help. And there's tons of information there that we can help to make sure that our doctors are comfortable and feel that this is a safe process, which is the main thing that we as physicians have to follow. First, do no harm. And if we don't understand how this works, if we don't understand how that's going to affect patients, none of our physicians will be comfortable doing it. So we want to make sure that education is present and available to them.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from our participants? You indicate by raising your hand. I don't see any hands.
Listen.
Oh, okay. Ras Bobby, you're live.
Yes, what I think is that we in looking for the information about the research, we don't necessarily have to invent the wheel, because a lot of these studies have been done, even on a university level in places like Jamaica. Because as I was talking earlier about the brother who is the Dr. McLaughlin or something like that, who heads the research division in the University of the West Indies relating to all kinds of different strains for cannabis, and because there is something that really struck me one time, some time ago. I was asked to do a lecture or to do a talk in St. Croix. And at the session, there was this geneticist, from a certain part of the States. He come forward bringing information about seeds. So it so happened that, we checked out to see what kind of seeds these people dealing with. And it was just amazing. You know, we find out that the seeds they had was hybrid, and the seeds that they had something to do with reducing the sperm count of men. You know, I'm saying all this to say that we in a world going towards something that we're not accustomed with on the scale at which we want to get accustomed with it. You know, so it takes some skill to bring it to the standard that is needed in terms of the production. Because without the production, the profit cannot be made. But then let all the profit be for the masses of the people versus just a few people. You know, because, you know, it's just ridiculous again for the richer ones to just come and become richer, while the poorer ones who've gone through the grind cannot get a little richer. So if we can balance that out, even on a social level, because what happening there now is that a lot of youths are needed to help with the agricultural aspect of it, because the ganja is an agricultural product. You know, sometimes we just act as though ganja is not an agricultural product. But in terms of the production with the ganja, you know, it can help a lot of things on a social level, because for people to get interested, a lot of the youths who have been indoctrinated in the concept of the American dream, they don't have no vision to work on the land, because they've been spoiled with certain electronic equipment and games, and they're just in a different world, kind of in a mental frenzy, and the mental frenzy drives them away from the land. So if they can see that as an outlet from which they can make a profit for themselves as native people, you know, it can give them a vibe to go back to the land. Because without we go back to the land, my sister, of all the things that we need in terms of our physiological aspects, if we never go back to the land, we can never get the energy from Mother Earth. You know, because Mother Earth is the producer of all things. And just nurturing, just spending time in the land, with the use of the herbs, with the use of the fruits, you know, giving respect to the elements, the earth, the air, the water, the fire, you know, and balance out things in life, you know, and every day do some breathing exercises, and have St. Thomas in a different way, because the other way is that the killings will continue, and because children vex, and when they vex, they're killing who are wrong them. They're going to go where the white man living and kill some white man up there because they vex. They're killing who right or wrong them. So there's a lot, I'm saying those things to say that there's a lot of anger in the community. And children are getting to be in a position to help in bringing about a great project that involves the planting of cannabis on a real level. You know, maybe they should have some agency employing local people to get involved with whoever coming from abroad. You know, because when you go in other people's places, that's how they do it, you know. You know, they're encouraging their own people to come and have a part in what you're coming to do, because it's a good thing. The scene is a good plan. And their policy is that you should have a VI person on that thing with you, you know. So there can be a greater energy by the whole community to cause the production and the industrialization of cannabis to be one of the greatest foreign exchange earners for our country. You know, because cannabis is we live in the tropics. I mean, sometimes we know hurricane does come, but that's expected. We're in the hurricane zone. Well, other than that, the Virgin Islands is a place with absolute sunshine. Every day is sunshine. Versus places in the States that the summer is just for a while. So if we can just focus a little bit, you know, and help in writing projects and the help of the farmers, because if the farmers don't get help, what kind of food we gonna eat? You know, it's a whole social revolution that we need, but it starts with the land. If you don't have land, you don't have anything, you know. You know? And a lot of people in the Virgin Islands in that precarious situation. So they have to live a life where they just have to keep paying bills. And that in itself is a frustration, you know. But if a youth have the ability to produce 100, 250 ganja plants every 2 months, you know, of the highest grade, you know, it's a great liberation for the youth. And that is the way of life that the people underestimate, because that's what the youths doing on the corner, they're selling weed. And that's how they can have some money to put in their pocket. So they think. You know, I'm not saying that is the only way, but so they think, because that is the only way they're seeing it. Because they see their friends doing it and their friends have money in their pocket and they come in and they're doing it too. But then unfortunately they're selling other things. So we talk about the tobacco, then we have to talk about the cocaine, because that is what is destroying the community. You know, just a complete revolution. Let's go back to the land, give the people the authority to plant their cannabis. Our position is legalize cannabis. That is our position as Rasta. Because why should you put a certain herb under duress? Yeah? Nixon bring about his war on drugs and target black people. You know, these people just targeting black people because they know the black people like cannabis. So they wanted a reason to be able to arrest and force black people to work for them. That is what happened in there. You know, so now it's time for, it's legal. It's time for us to embrace the opportunity and take control of what is ours. Because it's our culture, they come and steal, and now they put it in a different way. And now rich people want to come and just take over the place and then take all the weed production is for them. A certain percentage, and a big percentage of the production of cannabis in St. Thomas should be from St. Thomas people. Come on, man. That is our culture, that is African culture, that is ethnic culture, that is Rasta culture, that is Virgin Islands culture. You know, we just have to be sensible. The other brother is I think is Michael Emmanuel, a scientist from Dominica working in Mona campus in Jamaica with all the information about ganja. And those two men that I mentioned is PhDs in botany and all the aspects of plants, and they specializing in production of cannabis for specific diseases. So all I'm saying is that we can find the information in terms of the certain strains for different reasons. But this geneticist was producing, the man was producing cannabis that lowers the sperm count of men. What kind of vibe is that? What kind of mind would cause a man to do something like that? You know?
So Ras Bobby kind of gave away part 2 of the series, which is the farmers, and that's going to be later in March. So we're definitely, this is just the beginning or one of many conversations that we plan to have. We plan to be very inclusive. The focus for the office for the senator is to have the industry be very inclusive of the local community, the local physicians, the local farmers for cultivation, opportunities for young people to get into, our local kids to get into chemistry, agriculture program at UVI, to really make the industry inclusive of the local residents of the Virgin Islands. So Rasba, we were on the same page with that. And that really is the focus of the office as we move forward with the other part of the legislation. Some of the concerns you express is partly, well, mostly the reason why that other part of the bill has not been brought to the floor yet. It's misconceived that that's a full recreational legalization. That bill was not. And there were a lot of, and I'm trying to not have this tonight's conversation be political, but since you brought that up, there's a reason why that bill was not brought forward by the senator as is. And so we're hoping to clean that up and bring that bill to the floor within the second quarter. So that'll be between April, someplace between April and June. That's the plan for that. But it's getting late, and I want to say that I want to thank the panelists for availing themselves tonight to have this conversation with the community. I want to thank the community for participating with us, engaging with us, your questions. I got a lot of comments on this side that this was very informational, and it was refreshing to have the conversation in an open forum, open to everyone, to hear doctors and herbalists and other members of the community talk freely and candidly about the benefits of cannabis without a shadow. And so I want to say thank you. I would like to ask each panelist to, I'm gonna do like on the legislative floor, 1 minute to give closing remarks. And then I'll have the senator close us out for the night.
I wanted to say thanks everyone for this opportunity to participate in this process. I learned a lot from everyone here. There's always learning happening in medicine. And it's my hope that these conversations will continue because this is not just one aspect. I think we're coming in from this perspective of medicine, but I also have a background in public health, that we know that this is something that affects people's life in different ways, and making sure that in terms of policy, we address the social side of things, that we make sure that people are protected, indigenous people are protected. And again, this is not made to just make the rich richer, but actually something that serves this community. So I'm thankful and grateful to be part of this, and I'm happy to continue to participate in any forum that helps educate physicians on the pharmacology understanding of cannabis. Thank you.
Thank you again, Senator Searle and Simone, for the invitation. My closing remarks, I really just wanted to say, to me, this has been just an invigorating educational journey for me as an individual. Learning, I'm a lifelong learner, and so learning more and more about something that I didn't know much about has been a very exciting thing. And I hope that we conveyed that to the audience. I hope that each one of us, dives down this rabbit hole of learning more about something that's so new, but yet so old and pristine and helpful to lots of people and animals. I mean, we don't have veterinary scientists on here, but there's a huge cannabis industry for pets. So if you come across anybody or have a pet, ask your vet, is that something that they would be interested in learning about too? But it just goes to show you that cannabis touches so many different industries. As Dr. Christian spoke about, the social and political was one of the reasons that I chose to get involved as a medical doctor. I've never really been bothered by what other people think about how I practice medicine, because it's an art, and each individual physician gets to practice medicine and kind of bring their own artistry to their practice. So for those who may be in the audience or maybe listening to a recorded conversation, explore the interest, because patients do need our expertise. They need our presence. They need our to bounce the ideas and things off of us. And we need to really be present with our patients, because that patient-physician relationship is truly a gift. I see about 5 of my patients on here today. So I thank you all, for showing up and showing interest. I know that many, many more have many different questions. So I'm expecting to get those sorts of questions, and I'd like to be able to give answers. So Senator Serow, thank you for your leadership. Thank you to the esteemed panelists. Ross Bobby, I have nothing but love for you from the day I stepped foot on this island. Dr. Christian, you're my new BFF, so we'll be talking offline. And thank you again for the invitation. This has been great. Time well spent.
Blessings. Yes, just, you're hearing me? Huh?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's just so good, beautiful to be here, I don't think we're here just by chance. I think it was written. And as it was written, so it shall be, What I have to say is that I am a herbalist and I respect all plants. More so the most persecuted plant. That plant had to be on the run for a long time, even if it's stationary. And we have to keep fighting for our human rights, because it's our rights to be able to, as the indigenous and as native people, to enjoy the fruits of our ancestors, and once we do that, the healing cannot be real, So I think with a little thought and a little strategy, we can reach far, But it's for us to be broad-minded in our approach when it comes to this wonderful herb, I have read stories of they finding cannabis in a cave, like chunk up together, and when they tested, it tested as though it was there for 60,000 years, And when you look in the under Google, you see that they say ganja was introduced to the inhabitants of those islands just 1320. It's a big lie. It's a long, long time ago. The oldest people on the planet used to use cannabis for various things, over 100 different ailments, because the plant have over 100 different nutrients. That is how powerful this plant is. It's a real mystic plant, and in our own way, we can use it for our own development and our own love and our own community and so. And just happy to be able to share with the other people. And thank you, sister, for inviting me, Mr. Janil, and the other lady over there, whose name I don't remember. Yeah, but nice to reason with all of you and stay blessed. One love, guidance.
Thank you. And then I will have the senator do our closeout.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. We really get here because we didn't like the direction of cannabis and how mainstream we were going without being able to include locals and the farmers and those who are quote unquote in the underground market. Our intent was really to bring them over and tell them to gain a living and to be involved in the industry. Additionally, we passed Act 8167 in the 32nd legislature, and many policymakers within the institution and in the administration didn't see the benefit of moving the medicinal portion. We really made a promise to those who had chronic illnesses that we would move medicinal, and we did, but there was a lack of action because it didn't, quote unquote, bring in as much revenue to save GRS as many wanted it to. So we took a different approach to the cannabis topic, and we began with the education portion. So that's where we're at to really inform, because there's a saying in political science that it is not the job of the government to keep the people from falling into error. It's the job of the people to keep the government from falling into error. So if we continue these discussions, raise public awareness, an informed society is a strong society. So that's our intent with this. So I want to thank the people of the Virgin Islands and in the diaspora and those abroad for joining us tonight. I want to thank our esteemed panelists, Ras Bobby, Dr. Christian, Dr. Woodson, and I also want to thank my staff. I am because they are, and nothing in this office is done in silos. So I want to thank my Chief of Staff, Simone, my researcher, Keandre Thomas, and my Communications Director, Diana Cruz, for the work that they have done and will continue to do. And as we move forward with this, we intend for it to be a collaborative effort. So I want everyone to get home safe if you're driving, but this is a united front. So as our motto says, on the seal of the Virgin Islands, united in pride and hope. So thank you again, and everyone be safe.